In our City in Crisis Finding Solutions series, we often report on homelessness and neighbors' frustrations.
But tonight, a different twist. I found a group doing a whole lot of good, and they used to live on the streets themselves.
Much like the door on the back of her truck, Kristle Delihanty has seen her life on the upswing.
So in here we have coats and jackets.
But it's been a journey filled with potholes, disappointments, and worse.
I see the person inside of you beyond your addiction, beyond your homelessness.
And that's because Kristle has experienced both addiction and homelessness. She was a heroin addict for 20 years that all started with an opiate addiction, she says, from pills prescribed by a doctor.
The person inside of me was screaming out, saying, someone please see me. You know, I'm dealing with this addiction, but I'm not this addiction. I'm struggling with homelessness, but I'm not homelessness.
Then about 6 years ago, she was transitioning out of homelessness and addiction, both of those in her rearview mirror, when something struck her. She won't forget the moment.
It was driving in my neighborhood and seeing the heartbreak behind both of those issues and wanting to do something.
And do something she did. Every Monday and Friday, you'll find Delihanty's group, Portland Saints Love, set up in the shadow of the Portland Pickles baseball field at Lents Park. Inside that truck, you'll find clothing, sleeping bags, shoes, hats, gloves, undergarments, also Narcan and fentanyl test strips. What you won't find is judgment.
That's kind of my heart, is just to come out here. I want people to be seen and heard and valued.
It's rising the collective together. You know, we're all elevating each other.
On the other side of the parking lot, you'll find Daniel Leach. His friends call him Pure Joy, or PJ. He's a living example of the power of recovery. Addicted to meth and heroin for decades, he now works with PDX Saints Love. From his table under the tent, he hands out the goods.
We got tarps, we got hand sanitizer and blankets.
Meeting Kristle Delihanty and getting off the streets transformed his life, creating a ripple effect.
I got clean and sober, and I got a purpose now instead of an addiction. And the purpose is out here trying to make a difference on the street by actually being on the street, doing the job.
And that's another thing. Delihanty's entire staff came from the streets. They start volunteering at first, then they're hired at a living wage and begin the process of employment training.
So we have 4 of our staff members who are entering, actually this last week they entered certification for community health work. And so for generations, that will change their lives, you know, and not just their lives, but the community around them, because they'll learn how to love and care and, you know, connect to their community. So
Delihanty's group is now applying for city funding, which she says would be game-changing. Helping more people is her goal, using herself as an example that things can get better. It's a constant challenge, especially with the enormous homeless and addiction problem on Portland streets. But she sees a war worth waging.
I sometimes feel defeated, and then the moment that I feel like giving up, someone gets their housing voucher called up, and I get to be the one that calls them and says, we did it, we made it, you know.
They really are making a big difference out there in this very challenging environment. Of course, we'll keep you posted as they apply to get that city funding and see how that works out for them.
Combating the crisis. We've told you about the issues facing Portland, the homelessness, the crime. Tonight, a group that is single-handedly making progress. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us for KATU News at 11, or it's not 11 o'clock, because it's a special edition of KATU News. I'm Deborah Knapp. In tonight's City in Crisis Finding Solutions report, Steve Dunn returns to the Lents neighborhood, where one organization is making an ever-expanding dent in the homeless problem.
On this cold, rainy day in the shadow of Lents Park, Savise Rajsavong is getting his beard trimmed. After years living in a tent, he now sleeps in a vehicle.
Trim, tailored, that's what you call it.
He stops by PDX Saints regularly, where he finds bountiful services like food, clothing, a warm shower, and yes, the beard trim. If you saw our first story, you know it was all started by Kristle Delihanty. after her own issues with drug addiction and homelessness.
Because he works and he's trying to be an important part of society, staying clean, having haircuts, so that when he walks into his job, he's not discriminated against or people aren't labeling him as unhoused. We want him to just be integrated into community the best he can.
Oh, it's great. So I'm praying and then, I'm grateful. So I thank you every day so that I'm getting help and stuff and then be able to pass that help along too.
Savise's beard isn't the only thing growing around here. Since the last time we visited, PDX Saints is expanding, offering more services to people on the streets, like healthcare provider Care Oregon. More people are also finding permanent housing through this organization. The goodness is overflowing. And remember, many of the employees here have experienced homelessness themselves, like Daniel Leach.
You guys are growing a little bit, aren't you?
We are growing and getting bigger and bigger, and we're partnering up with a bunch of brand new organizations that are like, we're just like an octopus spreading our tentacles out across Portland.
But that's not all. The weekly gathering here has become a classroom of sorts. Grace Klein and Grace Hunter are seniors at the University of Portland studying integrative health and wellness. This is their final project before graduation. It's been eye-opening.
I think it's a really great experience. Just I haven't done this kind of like outreach before, and I feel like there's kind of like a lot of stigma around it, and but I think this is really awesome, and I think it would be great if like more students or more people could come out here and help out as well.
There's definitely I think a more need for events and resources like this, just to help like the whole population and stuff, because this is only kind of one part of Portland.
But it's a small sliver of the city that seems to have figured out how to help. And it's all thanks to Delihanty. And despite the driving rain making just about everything uncomfortable and making me question our choice of stories on this day, there is this dose of reality infused with compassion.
The drive that keeps me going is just remembering that I get to go home. I get to take a week off, and there are a lot of people who don't. They don't have, when it's snowing, they don't have a choice to not go outside. They're just out here.
An ever-expanding dent in a crisis that doesn't take a day off.
Couple of notes. Savise, the man who is getting his beard trimmed, is currently awaiting permanent housing. And we're told this same group is planning to start another homeless assistance program in the Montevilla neighborhood. We reached out to city and county leaders to get their thoughts on programs like PDX Saints, but we didn't hear back.